Welcome to Natural Habitat Adventures, Daily Dose of Nature. I'm your host, Sunny Vanderstar. Today's topic is Know Before You Go, the Canadian Rockies. And it will be presented by our fabulous NADHAB Expedition Leader, Lianne Thompson. Lianne, thank you so much for being here. I know we've got lots of folks who are super excited to hear this presentation because they get to go join you sometime soon. So let's dive right in.
Hey guys, yeah, thanks so much for joining. I'm super pumped to be here again after a couple of years of having this in my schedule and being canceled from the pandemic. We got to run the trips for the first time last summer and they were so much fun and I can't wait to be doing them again. So we'll kind of go through places that we're going to stay, things that we're going to eat, things that we will see along the way, lots of stops, and all of the amazing things that we're going to do on the trip. But before we get started, I figured I should introduce myself. So my name's Lianne Thompson. I am one of the expedition leaders for Natural Habitat Adventures. I did start back in 2018, and there I do run our polar bear trips. I'm one of the expedition leaders there. I just actually finished our Northern Lights season last week. I just got home. I will also say that since getting home, I have developed a bit of a cold, so I do apologize if I end up kind of coughing my way through this presentation, but I still really wanted to share all of this information with you guys. And then I've also do our trips in the Cotswolds, of course, the Canadian Rockies that we're going to talk about today, as well as our Iceland itinerary. So I do quite a few different trips for NatHab, and the Canadian Rockies is kind of in my backyard. I do live in Cranbrook, British Columbia, which is actually close to the kind of US and Alberta border above Glacier National Park in Montana. So I live kind of right along the Canadian Rockies. So essentially this trip is my opportunity to kind of share my love of my backyard with everyone who comes to visit. It's a beautiful place to live and a beautiful place to visit. And I certainly hope to see you guys here throughout our trips this summer. So first of all, where are we going to be hanging out? So I've kind of pinpointed Calgary on the map as well on the right-hand side. That is where you'll land. We go into Banff, and then there's kind of the four mountain national parks that do make up this region, and we will be visiting all of them. The majority of our time is certainly spent in Banff, but we do have time in Jasper National Park, Yoho National Park, Kootenay National Park, and then we do duck out of there towards the end and head over to the Bugaboo Range. And we go in the heli lodge there. So we are covering quite a bit of area when we are here on the trip, but there is loads and loads to see. So first of all, you will land in the Calgary airport. It's actually a really nice airport. I travel on a lot of airports, and Calgary airport is one of my favorite. It's not too big, not too small. It's just great. And you will go through customs here and then meet your transfer driver here. So kind of just outside of the international arrivals is where someone will be there waiting for you. The company that we've hired, we used them last year and they were fantastic, just kind of bringing people from the Calgary airport into Banff. Which is where we will be starting our journey. But yeah, Calgary Airport is a great place to start. Customs line can sometimes be long, as most airports, but I find it typically quite smooth. They've got a great system going there. So after you do meet your transfer driver, it is about an 1.5 to 2 hour drive from Calgary itself right into Banff town. And then we will arrive at the hotel when you get there. And if you do come in advance, there's actually quite a bit that you can do in the town of Banff itself. Even if you're not up for too much adventure or just have a couple of hours, just walking the main strip is a great place to start and kind of get to know Banff. There's lots of restaurants, there's lots of shopping. And if you are a person who wants to do a lot of shopping, this might be some of your best opportunity. There's a couple other gift shops and stuff along the way, but certainly right in Banff town is very helpful for doing any of that souvenir shopping kind of right off of the bat. If you are up for a bit more of a walk. There's a hike. Tunnel Mountain and Vermilion Lakes are nearby, so you can go and do some of that. There's also a couple of museums that we don't visit during our itinerary that you could check out. So there's the Banff Park Museum, the White Museum, a couple others that are also quite right in town there. So there's quite a bit to do and explore if you do end up coming in a day early. We all know that flights are being a bit of a pain at the moment, lots of delays and cancellations and stuff, so kind of coming in a bit early, it's not a bad idea. And there is plenty to explore. Banff itself is a really, really beautiful town, so it's a great opportunity to kind of hang around there. But where are we staying when we are at when we are in Banff? It is the Moose Hotel and Suites. So it is just up from the main strip. So if you do come in and you're wanting to explore, you essentially just walk a couple of minutes down the road, and then you are right there in the Banff downtown area. So it's a really beautiful hotel, lots of amenities. There's a restaurant there too. Of course, we'll have breakfast there, and you're certainly welcome to have dinner there if you're there a couple of days early. But yeah, it's a really lovely hotel. And I'll just point out the other hotel that we are at later on in the trip. We do have our one night that we are, after our welcome dinner, that we're at the Moose Hotel, but after that we do stay for 4 nights at the Lake Louise Inn. So we do transfer about an hour or so up the road, and our main base is going to be at the Lake Louise Inn while we are exploring in the national parks. It's a great place because it's just very central, obviously right near Lake Louise, Moraine Lake. It's a great place to hop on the Columbia Parkway, the Icefields Parkway, and kind of explore the different national parks as well. So both the hotels, they've got great amenities, again, great breakfasts, very comfortable, clean rooms, and lots of great views all around because we are definitely in the mountains here. And then one other thing, obviously very important to talk about before we dive into what our things are going to look like on the trip is food. Of course, if you've been on a NatHab trip before, you'll be very well versed in the fact that you will not go hungry. You will certainly eat a lot of food on these trips. And because we're in the national parks, we want to make sure that we're not wasting time throughout the day kind of sitting indoors in restaurants, because there's just so much beauty that is around. So that does mean that we do some picnics. So we'll get nice spreads, find nice locations. Of course, this is going to be weather dependent, and weather does change constantly in the Rockies. But we do have quite a bit of sunny time there, so we'll have picnics, there will be shelter, we'll figure things out if there is rain, but there's going to be picnics. And we do have a couple of times when we are eating at restaurants, but eating at the restaurants, we are kind of trying to select these restaurants that do have views and opportunities for us to still be taking in the beauty throughout the day. So kind of not wasting time sitting indoors throughout the day when we want to be making sure that we're maximizing the time that we're getting to explore and see the sights and sounds and everything that's going on in the Canadian Rockies. Of course, in the evening time, we will be eating at restaurants as well for our dinners, and those ones are really just kind of selected for some of it's the history of the buildings that we're going to be staying in, but fabulous food, and those ones are much less focused on the external environment, but they're still just great places for us to go and eat. But you will be well fed. We'll have lots of snacks. Drinking water is certainly something that's going to be really important because this is a fairly active trip. We're going to be doing hikes and walking around a lot, and especially if you're coming from different altitudes, making sure that you're consuming lots of water is going to be really helpful in making sure that you stay hydrated and healthy throughout the trip. So we make sure you've got lots of water and lots of food to enjoy about our time there. The other thing to talk about is that we do partner with a company in Banff called Discover Banff Tours. They do have these lovely vehicles that we use, and as with other NatHab trips that you'll go on as well, we do make sure that the vehicle size that we have is enough so that every single person does get a window seat so that they can be, again, enjoying and maximizing our time enjoying those views. So we do have these vehicles, and then we also with those vehicles, we end up with a kind of local guide and driver who is with us throughout the duration of the trip. So it essentially does mean that you've got 2 guides that are going to be with you. So you have the myself or one of the other expedition leaders for NatHab, as well as a guide and driver from Discover Banff Tours. We partnered with them last year, and they are phenomenal drivers, phenomenal guides, and I'm super excited for you guys to meet the folks that we work with there, so that we can all kind of share in our knowledge of the area. Yeah, So these vehicles are also really important because they enable us to get to places that you can't necessarily do if you're doing it just in kind of your own private vehicle. There's lots of regulations on where you are and are not allowed to drive and park in the national parks, as they try to kind of control the number of people that are able to kind of flow in, and parking and controlling all of that kind of stuff. So partnering with Discover Banff Tours enables us to kind of offshoot any of those regulations, and therefore we can get to places where we need to be whenever we need to do it. All right, we'll dive into some itinerary stuff. So of course we do have our welcome dinner that'll occur on night 1. We'll overnight in the Moose hotels, and then the next day we do an introduction to the national parks. So Banff National Park was actually Canada's first national park, established in 1885. And it was kind of established after 3 railway workers kind of discovered, and I'll use that in quotations, discovered the hot springs that occur, or that are present in Banff National Park. Of course, these springs and the entire area was being used by Indigenous people for many, many years prior to that. But as the railway was being developed across Canada, some of these railway workers kind of stumbled upon this hot springs, and essentially the national park was created around the hot springs in order to help protect the beauty of it. So in the morning time, we do kind of go over to the Cave and Basin area and talk about the history of the park. Of course, that's a great opportunity for seeing birds as well. And then there's also the Banff Spring snail, which is an endangered species found nowhere else on Earth apart from in these hot springs. So we do get to know Banff National Park and the history of it. We talk about the railway, talk about park establishment, Indigenous presence and history, in the national parks as well. And then we'll kind of go on many different stops, stop at some waterfalls and some overlooks, and yeah, just a lot of really good sights. But the idea of this is to kind of introduce you to national parks in Canada, because it did start off with Banff. So our morning we do spend in Banff getting to know that area, and then we do actually duck out to Kootenay National Park. So we do start heading north, and we head over to Kootenay National Park. So we will stop at Marble Canyon, which is the picture that you can see on the left-hand side there. So it is this canyon that's been kind of carved out with water and the impacts of that on erosion, and it's just an absolutely stunning canyon, beautiful waters, beautiful, beautiful views. And throughout the week, we do kind of talk about the impacts that have happened, that have shaped the national parks that we see. So of course, fire is another one that we do end up seeing around here. A lot of the area, there was a fire back in 2003 that burned down a large area around Marble Canyon and in Kootenay National Park. So we're talking about, you know, fire ecology, water erosion. We'll talk about glaciers and mountain formation. We do talk about a whole bunch of these different topics. And again, it's kind of a great introduction to them right on day 1 as we explore Marble Canyon and see the impacts of the fires. We do also on this drive this afternoon, we will pass over the Continental Divide, which is quite an interesting place because it's just kind of this peak that it is, if you look at the BC Alberta border, the border line is quite squiggly, and it's because it's kind of following that Continental Divide, where water on the west side of it will be going to the Pacific, and then east is over to the Atlantic Ocean. So there is this Continental Divide where the water just starts flowing in different directions because of the like elevation and peak that we're at there. So we will kind of get a chance to talk about the Continental Divide and again, see this Marble Canyon, lots of footbridges and stuff that will pass around there. So we'll be on foot quite a bit today, but we will be driving, and this is kind of going to be typical for most of our days here, that when we are driving, we'll hop on and off the Discover Banff tour bus several times. We'll make stops, we'll go for little strolls. Sometimes they're longer walks, sometimes they're shorter pit stops, but we'll hop on and off quite a bit so that we make sure we get a lot of chance to stretch our legs. After this is kind of the end of our day 1. We will head back over to, or we'll go check into the Lake Louise Inn, and then we start exploring that area. And we start that very, very early. So we do a sunrise at Moraine Lake. And this is one of the ways that Parks Canada is actually newly introducing ways of regulating people throughout the national parks. The parking lot at Moraine Lake is quite small. And prior to me exploring sunrises at Moraine Lake with NatHab, I have done it in my own time, and I've had to get up at like 3 o'clock in the morning to go and try to get up into this very small parking lot, because the parking lot can close, 4, maybe 5 a.m. depending on the time of the sunrise. Because the parking lot is full really early. So I've had to camp and get up really early and go up to this parking lot and essentially kind of fall back asleep before we get up for sunrise. And this year, they're actually starting it where no private vehicles are allowed in the parking lot, period. So in order to come and see Moraine Lake at any time of day, you either have to be on a tour or you have to kind of go on the shuttle. So it's really exciting that we have the opportunity to go as our small group and not have to kind of go book on one of these massive shuttle buses in, but we can go in and enjoy Moraine Lake at sunrise. It is very early, especially in the earlier late June, early July trips. We will be up kind of 4 o'clock in the morning, 4:30. I don't have the sunrise times memorized in my brain right now, but later on in the season, it does get a little bit later. But this is a very early morning start. So 4 or 5 a.m. wake up call so that we can catch the sunrise. In this area, what you're seeing right now, this is Moraine Lake below, and then behind is the Valley of the 10 Peaks. And this was actually viewed on Canada's $20 bill for quite some time. So people call it a $20 view. I think it's a bit more magical than that myself, but it is a really beautiful and stunning hike or lake, and we do start off with a little bit of a hike. So we go up what they call the rock pile, and so it is kind of about a 10-minute walk up, and so it'll get your legs pumping, it'll get you warm, which is good because that early in the morning it can be quite chilly. It's typically the time that we'll put on our most layers because mountain weather in the morning and overnight can get quite cold. So we'll show up in our layers and we do kind of walk up this rock pile, get our hearts pumping and warm ourselves up, and then wait for sunrise. So we're typically here for about an hour or so, hoping that this mountain glow that you're seeing on the picture here now does appear for us. Of course, it's weather dependent, and sometimes it's cloudy, sometimes it's a bit rainy, but regardless, I've never had a bad morning at Moraine Lake. It's always a really, really beautiful area. Yeah, it's quite spectacular. And one of the other things that we'll be looking at or looking for when we are going up Moraine Lake is the pika, which I learned last year actually that Americans call the pika. I will continue to call it a pika. It's also nicknamed the rock rabbit because it is related to the rabbit, just obviously much smaller, shorter limbs and ears. But when we're kind of going up this rocky slopes that we're heading up on the rock pile, is really perfect habitat for the pika. And so what I'll often be doing is listening out for them because they make like a meep noise. So you're just kind of walking around and it's quite quiet. It's very early in the morning. So as we're heading up there, I'm just listening out for those meeps and looking for this small little creature that's scurrying around in the rocks. I've had a lot of success finding them in the rock pile. And so what these guys are doing at this time of year is going to be summer. They are going to be up and active and collecting food. Pika do not hibernate, so they are active all year round. In the winter time, they're not up on the surface and kind of running around doing things, and instead they're underneath the snow in all these rock piles, and they've got all of these habitats that are underneath. But throughout the summertime, one of the things that's really important for them to do is to collect food. So what they're doing right now when we are visiting the national parks is collecting, wildflowers and grasses, and what they'll actually do is lay them out in these like hay piles. And so what that does is it dries out their food source, and then they can go and take it and they store it in their dens until winter so that they've got food throughout the winter time. So they're very, very busy animals at this time of year, kind of collecting and maintaining all of this food that they're trying to make sure that they've got plenty of in order for the winter. So Parks Canada, they will do, and many areas do this too, they'll be keeping track of hay piles. So lots of studies that will be going on because they want to know how many hay piles are happening, because it can give an indication about the population size. So whether or not populations are increasing or decreasing, which is really important for an animal like a pika because they are becoming victims of climate change and the impacts that that's having in their habitat. because they live in these high mountain ecosystems that are already quite cold and moist. They're adapted to living life in these areas. And as we're seeing climate change happening, then it's making these top regions warmer. And so, you know, if you're an animal that's used to a certain temperature, you can move and try and stay in that temperature range if you're just trying to look for a colder area. But when you're already living in an area that's kind of at its coldest, there's not really very far that the pika can kind of head up the mountain, because they're already living towards that higher altitude area. So with warming climates, they just can't continue to go further north. So it's really important for us to be keeping track of their populations. Currently, there are areas where they're seeing decline, but they are still listed as a least concern animal. They're not endangered or threatened at this moment, but certainly it's something that it's important to kind of keep an eye on for these animals because of the impacts of climate change. But for now, we do have a lot of success kind of finding these things in the rock piles in the morning at Moraine Lake. From there, we go to Lake Louise, which is oftentimes what people think of when they think of coming to the Rocky Mountain National Parks, and especially Banff. You think of Lake Louise. In Banff National Park itself, there's about 4 million people that come to visit each year. Most of them are come and visit Lake Louise. But one of the things that I find most shocking is that people will spend maybe less than 20 minutes at Lake Louise. They get out of their car, they come to this shoreline, they take a picture, and then they leave, which is such a shame because there's so much beauty around Lake Louise. So we do spend some more time here this morning. So we do go and go right up to the lakeshore, which is going to be busy. There's going to be quite a few people there because it's one of the main places that people are wanting to see. So we'll go up. It's a great place for people watching. If you're interested in people watching, you'll probably hear like 12 different languages being spoken around you, but lots of diversity of people that are around. So we'll show up and we will go kind of right along the lakeshore view here, but we will then take time to go do different types of walks. So here's one of the options that we've got where we can split the group into two, and along the right hand side of this picture is a hike that we call the Fairview Lookout, because the Fairview Hotel in this picture would just be kind of toward or behind us. And so you can do a bit more of a strenuous hike and again, get those legs moving, that blood pumping, and go head up through the forest to a lookout that looks kind of back along Lake Louise and to the Fairview Hotel. And then the other option, if you're not wanting to go do kind of a more strenuous hike, is we follow the path along to the right-hand side. The Fairview Lookout would be on the left-hand side of this picture, and then the right-hand side is the lakeshore walk. So walking all along that lakeshore, and you can go quite far to the back towards the glacier. But even just kind of getting about 5, maybe 10 minutes away from the lake, right at this lakeshore in front of the Fairview Hotel, it gets rid of about 90% of the crowd. So you can take the easier stroll. We stop and take a lot of pictures along the way. And Lake Louise is quite famous because it kind of helped catapult tourism in the area. And a lot of people will actually consider it the birthplace of guided tourism in the Canadian Rockies. And so a lot of that happened was that in 1896, there was many people that were starting to hike and climb these peaks of the Canadian Rockies. And in 1896, one of them was Philip Stanley Abbott. And he was climbing up Mount Lefroy, which is in the back of this picture, and he actually fell to his death during that time. And it was the first mountaineering fatality in the Canadian Rockies. And this, of course, did cause a lot of trouble at the time. With the rail line coming in, tourism was being a huge thing. And obviously with tourism, we don't want to have fatalities happening. And so they actually considered shutting down mountain climbing in the Canadian Rockies altogether and just banning it because they didn't want it to become this area where fatalities were happening a lot. Luckily, this never actually happened, and instead Swiss guides were brought from Switzerland over to Canada because of the mountain peaks that existed there. These guides were really well traveled and used to mountaineering in that area. So the idea was that they could come to Lake Louise and the Canadian Rockies and actually teach and guide mountaineering here. And so that is what happened. And it has certainly helped to kind of catapult the mountaineering that happens and exploration of the Canadian Rockies. And it had so much success that even still, when you go visit Lake Louise, there is still like the history of the Swiss guides and Swiss culture that is there to kind of pay homage to the folks that allowed mountain tourism to be done safely and kind of eventually flourish into what it is today. And the presence of the Swiss guides also led to the formation of the Association of Canadian Mountain Guides, which is like a hiking certification that you can get. And so when we go to the CMH Lodge, the Heli Lodge towards the end of the trip, all the guides there are certified under this program that was kind of developed as a result of the Swiss guides that kind of were present here. So Swiss culture, very, very big, prominent in the area, and certainly helped to kind of catapult the tourism that was happening in the area. So we'll talk about that more, and we will explore all along the lakeshore in various different ways, but try to get the idea of having lots of different vantage points of Lake Louise and enjoy some peaceful time here. There is lots of other hikes that you can do, some of them extremely long and strenuous. I've done some of them that will take full day long hikes in the area, so there's certainly lots and lots to explore, but we'll spend kind of a couple hours here in the morning. After that, we do actually head, sorry, about a 10-minute drive away from Lake Louise itself and across the highway over to the Lake Louise ski hill, which maybe sounds a bit interesting to be doing in the summertime, but they do still operate their gondola throughout the summer. And so we do go head up the gondola. So the gondola, obviously on the right-hand side, you can see there's two different types of cars. So one of them is the open one that you'd be used to seeing for skiing. And then there's also the closed one. So if you're not a person who really wants to ride up an open gondola, then there's the closed option for you as well. But the gondola ride itself takes about 10 or 15 minutes to get up to the top. And then we are able to see Lake Louise and all of the views around the lake just from up top there. So it's a really, really stunning, beautiful place to enjoy views. And we get up to the top and we do enjoy some time up there, have a meal up there. There's also a wildlife interpretive gallery that's up at the top too. So we'll spend some time up the gondola. But one of the main reasons why we want to do the gondola is because it is one of the best spots that you can actually see grizzly bears. So the terrain around the ski hill there is essentially kind of like a world-class area for grizzlies because they're so commonly seen here. So the summer melt that happens creates these meadows that are just full of flowers and berries and lots of different food there that essentially creates like an all-you-can-eat buffet for the grizzlies there. There's also a whole bunch of dense patches of trees and forested areas for the grizzlies to come in and out of so that they can get shelter when they need, but they can come out and kind of frolic about when they're looking for food. There's fresh water in the area, and it is also right along a wildlife corridor. So essentially these wildlife corridors exist within the parks to help create space where animals, there's just restricted access for people during certain times of year, and so it just kind of creates more space for the wildlife, and in this case is one of them is the bears. So of course during the summer months you can go up the gondola, but there's still pretty good limitations on your ability to go into this area. So while we're up on the gondola, it's really fun. We get to the base of it and you usually ask the staff there if they've been seeing any of the grizzlies, and the podiums all have numbers, and they'll be like, oh yeah, you know, we've been seeing them around podium 17, and there's a lot of communication that happens there. So we keep our eyes peeled and look for these grizzly bears. And most of the time grizzlies do want to avoid areas where there's lots of people. And if you look at this like kind of top map in the left hand side, it is showing grizzly bear densities, but the other one is light pollution, and light pollution often coming along with the presence of people. And so if you look at it, typically the grizzly bear density is about the opposite of the light pollution, of the human densities, with the exception kind of right in the middle along that BC Alberta border, where we do see a high concentration of grizzlies, but we also see a high concentration of people. If you remember me saying 4 million people are visiting here, that's a lot of people who are there, and yet there's still quite a few bears to be found. In the 4 national parks, Kootenay, Yoho, Jasper, and Banff, there is estimates that there's actually about 200 grizzly bears in that area, so quite a dense population. And why this happens, why there's so many bears while there's also still so many people, is a bit of a lengthier conversation, and we certainly have that throughout the trips. But essentially it comes down to wildlife management tactics that are taken in the parks. So I'm sure many of you have seen bear-proof garbage bins, but having those presents, we talked already about wildlife corridors, so having seasonal trail or area closures. There is deterrence. We'll also talk about overpasses and underpasses that happen above and below the highways, so that animals are able to kind of move more freely without getting impacted by the highways themselves. But also large emphasis on education is what happens here in the parks. All of that in mind to just try and help protect the bear populations that do happen. And it has helped to kind of create this pretty strong presence of bears in the parks, which is wonderful. I love looking for bears. It is obviously something I do for work, but I do it in my own time as well. I want to go out and find bears, and we have pretty good success at finding bears in the national parks in the Canadian Rockies. So we'll hopefully kind of continue to have that success as well. And we will talk about bears, behavior, biology, and conservation on the trip. And the gondola is not the only chance that we have of seeing them, but it certainly is a really good way of being able to see them, because if you're a photographer, you can sit in those open chairs, and these pictures have just kind of come from being in the area and doing so safely. So we take up our binoculars and cameras up the gondola and hope that we're able to get a chance to see these bears, because who doesn't want to see bears? But yeah, we do enjoy plenty of time up the gondola and then up towards the top and hang out there looking for bears. Other wildlife, of course, around as well. Seen eagles up there, deer as well. So we will take our time and kind of see whatever it is that we can see. All right, one of the other days we do head into Yoho National Park, and we do stop by Emerald Lake here, and another one of these turquoise looking beautiful lakes, of which there are many that exist in the Canadian Rockies. All to do with glaciers and glacial impacts that are creating these beautiful, beautiful lakes. And when we head to Emerald Lake, we can talk more about disturbances here as well. You can see in the kind of towards the left-hand side of that picture, there's that big grassy open area, and this is an old avalanche path. So talking about avalanches is also another thing that is going to happen in the national parks, and it's disturbance on the ecosystems. But all of these disturbances kind of helping to regenerate and keep the ecosystems very healthy. So another great topic for us to discuss here. But when we get to the lake, this one's quite a casual morning, but people do have, if you're interested, you can opt to pay for a canoe ride if you're interested, but the bulk of the group, or everyone who doesn't opt to do that, we will do a stroll along Emerald Lake, so you can kind of see the lakeshore all along in this picture. So follow it all the way to the back, enjoy the mountain views. Lots of wildflowers here as well. And it's really interesting because now we are on the opposite side of the continental divide. So we are on the west side of the continental divide again, and the precipitation that happens here is very different than the other side. So we end up seeing a difference in the trees and plants and flowers, the diversity that exists here. So we do take some time this morning to relax. Again, we've had pretty good luck at having sunny weather days here, but kind of relax and take lots of photos and go exploring for wildflowers all along here. Birds is another thing that we can have a look at. Loons, I find quite common to exist here in Emerald Lake itself. So I always love trying to spot and look for as many birds, but we have a really nice kind of relaxing morning here at Emerald Lake. Can be morning or afternoon, just kind of depending on a couple of factors, but either way, a really relaxing time, which is nice after the 4 a.m. wake up from the night before to just kind of have an easy stroll along here. Also in this region is the Burgess Shale. If you're not familiar, in 1909, Dr. Charles Walcott discovered the Burgess Shale, and it's essentially this massive fossil area. But it's what makes it so unique is that it was soft-bodied animals. So instead of it, being bone fossils, there was like tissue that was found within the Burgess Shale area here. We don't go see the fossil area itself. It is a very long, full day, strenuous hike to get up there. So it's not something that we do offer on our trip. And instead, we actually meet with a gentleman named David Moore, who's part of the Burgess Shale Geoscience Foundation. He does lead these hikes, but he also does presentations for folks that aren't able to kind of go and see this area, and he is incredibly passionate about this and talks about evolution and the impact that the Burgess Shale had on our understanding of evolution. His talk is incredible, so we meet with him for about an hour, and he kind of talks about the Burgess Shale, the history, the fossils, evolution, all of that, and it's mind-blowing. It's incredibly cool. I don't think I've ever had a talk that ended with David Moore without people being like, could we just listen to him do like an 8-hour lecture? Because you would be fascinated by it. So he'll kind of dive into the Burgess Shale a bit later on in the day, since we aren't able to access it, but it's still a really cool component of the history in the area. Also, while we're in Yoho National Park, we go to Takaka Falls. People often call it Tak Falls because that's just a bit easier. The Takaka is actually the Cree word for magnificent. So it's a beautiful waterfall in the area. Depending on where you Google it, some will argue that it's the second highest waterfall in Canada, but there is actually 2 drops from it. You can kind of see it in this picture. There's one at the very top, and then you can see the water spouting out again. So it's like a second drop. So some will argue that because it may be 2 waterfalls instead of just one, that it's not the second tallest, the tallest one being out on Vancouver Island somewhere. But regardless of if it's the second tallest or not, it's still a really beautiful waterfall, a nice easy stroll. So can wander over here. You can get fairly close to the waterfall, or you can choose to stay back. You can get kind of right under the mist if you want to, or you can stay back and enjoy the views from there. And one of the other things that we'll be keeping an eye out for here is the mountain goat. So see that picture on the right-hand side. That's actually zoomed in right to the left of the waterfall. Picture that's on the right. So mountain goats, again, this isn't our only opportunity to see them, but mountain goats quite commonly seen around here. So we'll keep an eye out for them wandering around here. We do also see a lot of climbers, which I think is quite fun. They'll start really early morning in the day and they'll climb all the way up the side of Takaka Falls. So lots to do, lots of sights and stuff to see along here. The drive is also really cool. It's in an avalanche areas as well. So the drive is only open during certain times of year when avalanche risk is not that high, or is not high. And so the drive is really beautiful, and you actually have to, our Discover Banff guides and drivers, they have to like reverse part of the way up the kind of winding road up to Takaka Falls. So it's a very riveting ride. It's lots of fun. Speaking of riveting rides, we do also spend a day driving the Icefields Parkway, often viewed and voted as one of the world's most beautiful drives. And so we will spend a day doing this, and this is going from Lake Louise and kind of heading north up into Jasper National Park. And along this drive, there is opportunity to see wildlife. We do keep our eyes out for, bears and elk and moose and deer, bighorn sheep, lots of different animals that we can see along the way. However, it is a highway. And one of the things that we do make sure that we want people to understand is that it is a highway, and the importance here is to make sure that we are protecting the animals there. And so we don't get out of the vehicles to take pictures, and oftentimes we actually can't stop. Parks Canada does do a really good job of managing and kicking people out and keeping the flow of traffic going, so that we prevent traffic jams or bear jams from happening in the national parks that are risky for the wildlife as well as risky for people. So we will spend our day looking for wildlife, but also looking for lots of beautiful sites along the Icefields Parkway. So Bow Lake, Crowfoot Glacier, Howes Pass, all these different stops that we will be making throughout the day. Give us a chance to stretch our legs, but also take in all the sights of this beautiful, beautiful drive. Barn swallows, they're also commonly found at Bow Lake, lots of nests around there. We'll look for lots of other critters too. So it's a really, really stunning drive. And we'll make lots of stops throughout the day. And one of the most famous ones is Pedo Lake. So pictured here, we do stop here. Try to get there earlier in the morning so that we beat the crowds, but another of these turquoise lakes fed by a glacier. It's not visible anymore, this glacier. So again, it is one of those, like, time is of the essence when you're wanting to visit Pedo Lake, because the glacier that feeds it, I've read even as close to 10 years, we could lose the glacier. So what the disappearance of that glacier will have, we're not exactly sure what will happen with all of these lakes. And of course, that's something that's kind of happening throughout throughout the entire Rockies and elsewhere, of course, too, talking about glaciers retreating and melting. Pedo Lake is named after Bill Pedo. He was like an outfitter in the early 1900s, very eclectic man, and we will talk about him throughout the trip a couple of times. But he, one of the most famous stories you hear about him is him collecting a wild lynx that was asleep but kind of hung on the back of his backpack. He was bringing it to the zoo that was in Banff town, and before he stopped at the zoo, as one would, he stopped at a bar, stopped at a pub, because he wanted to have a drink before bringing this live lynx into the zoo. And the bar was very busy and he was displeased with that, so he released the lynx in the bar to scare everybody out of the bar so that he could then sit and drink in the peace and quiet. He, of course, then recaught the lynx and then brought it back to the zoo, or brought it to the zoo. But several different antics and stories that we will be telling about the history in the area, of which there is just an ample amount of history. Towards the end of our drive along the Icefields Parkway, we do get to the Athabasca Glacier, which is in Jasper National Park. And here we go on an Indigenous-led walk on the glacier itself. So we do partner with a company that's here as well. So Indigenous-led glacier walk. We do get outfitted, but we first kind of go on the explorers, rather than going and starting at the toe of the glacier, hiking up to all the cool things and then coming all the way back down, to try and save some time, because we want to make sure that we've got time in the morning to enjoy all of the sights and sounds along the Icefields Parkway. We show up, we meet our Indigenous guides, and then we hop on the Ice Explorers, which will have other people on there as well, but we hop on this big impressive vehicle, drive onto the glacier, hop off, and then we stick as a group with our glacier walk, and then we get to go right on the glacier and explore it. So we will have spikes, and you've got the trekking poles too if you would like them. And on here, of course, it can be quite cold because we are on a glacier itself. And we'll spend some time with the guides here and talking about Indigenous presence in the parks, their relationship with the water, their relationship with the ice. It's just a really, really incredible experience to learn more about different cultures, as well as the ecology and the ecosystem that does exist here. Climate change too, of course. So the Athabasca Glacier is one of the toes of the Columbia ice field. And it is kind of retreating, or we're losing it about like 5 meters a year. So it's receded almost a mile in the past, in just over 100 years. So we've lost a large amount of the glacier that that we do see. So again, it's another thing that it's just a great opportunity to go and see the impacts of climate change, and make sure that we can have a better understanding of what we can kind of be doing, and the impacts that are happening, and how we can help reduce them. And one of the ways to do that is certainly to help connect to an ecosystem. So it's one of the things that we're really happy to do on the Athabasca Glacier. Following the walk here, then we do head right back down to Lake Louise for one last night that we're staying in the hotel before we head over to the CMH Lodge. So this is the Bugaboo Lodge that we'll be staying at. And so in order to get up to this lodge, you do have to get on the helicopter. So we get on the helicopter, we take the helicopter up to this lodge, and the lodge does house something like 40 guests. So our trips, we're not the only people that are on the lodge. There'll be lots of other people there as well, but we do kind of hang out as a group kind of when and where we can. But this is also the opportunity for people who have different kind of interests in what they want to do, that they can split into different groups. The lodge itself, super comfortable. The rooms are great. They've got beautiful views. They've got a whole living room area with a library. There's some games and stuff too. The dining room, the food that we eat at the lodge, the chefs, the staff there, they create spectacular breakfasts and dinners that we eat in the lodge itself. And then throughout the day, when we're heli-hiking, we do have packed lunches. So it'll be sandwiches and lots of snacks and stuff that you'll kind of semi help prepare. We'll have your dietaries, and we'll make sure that they are suited to that. And you'll carry them with you, and water with you throughout the day. There's a rooftop hot tub, lots of places to chill and relax. So, if you came up to the lodge and you didn't want to spend all your time heli-hiking, that's totally fine. You're welcome to hang around the lodge and take in the beautiful views that exist there. Or we do spend a couple of days here doing heli-hiking. So what heli-hiking is that it does divide people into different groups. And I do have a video that I'll show here next, and hopefully the volume won't be too loud. But one of the ways that we'll move around is this heli huddle. So this is a group that is out already on a hike, and the helicopter does come in, and it does land pretty close to you. Of course, the helicopters, they're incredible. They know exactly what they're doing. You'll see that it can get quite windy here for a bit too. So we cover our arms. We've got long sleeves, which is good for sun protection, so you're not getting burned out there. But having sunglasses and hats, we're holding on to everything here. All of our gear does get kind of loaded into this side basket, and then you'll see this group of people on the right-hand side. This is all of the heli-hikers. So this is a group that's there, and they'll go and get loaded kind of into the vehicles, into the helicopter. So we'll go get on and off the helicopter that way. So same kind of offload process too. And then this is just the view of it, because the last video doesn't show exactly what the views you're getting, but then we all get on the helicopter, and then we will fly off into this beautiful Bugaboo mountain range and explore different regions on foot. So hopefully from that video, you can see that it is absolutely stunning. It is a really, really beautiful area. And the way that they kind of work is to make it so that we can divide the groups up based on your interest and your ability. So if you are a person who wants to come and chill and do really slow walks, maybe stop and see all of the wildflowers, have a nap on this nice mossy ground, when we arrive at the lodge, they will ask you what you're interested in doing. And so they'll kind of gauge you on that. So they end up dividing all of the 40-ish people that are there into 5 different groups. So it does mean that our group of Not Have Travelers likely will get split into a couple of different groups. And each group does, of course, have a guide that is with the lodge, and then myself, or your expedition leader, kind of bounces around in between the groups. So we're spending time with each of the groups as we can, but you can choose to kind of have a really leisurely time with it, and go for these kind of slower walks, do a lot more education, talk a lot more about, the ecosystem and wildlife and the mountain ranges themselves. So you can do a slower stroll, or you can do much more active. I've been up there where they have a group of runners as well who want to go run along these ridge lines. Not for me, but if that's what you're into, of course you can go and do that. But then they'll have everywhere in between. So from slow to runners, running groups, I don't think happening too often, but kind of have a whole variety of different walk types that you can do. But essentially we get plopped down in different regions. We'll be moved around in the helicopter and put into different areas each day. And they do a really great job of making sure that the areas that we're going and visiting, because we don't want to be having a huge impact on the environment that we're here in. They keep track all summer long of their heli-hiking and make sure that the regions that they're going to, there's so many areas and so many hikes are not being repeatedly used again and again and again, and instead just kind of a couple times each year, so that the impact on the ecosystem is not long lasting, and we're able to kind of continue to see the wildflowers and plants, even though it doesn't look like there's a whole lot in this photo right now, but other areas where there is more meadow areas, we're not having an impact on them, and the ecosystems are still able to flourish. So we're able to do all of these different ridgeline hikes, go for more strenuous, go for shorter ones, but essentially we'll move throughout the day. So sometimes you can be plopped down and go for a couple-hour hike in the morning. They'll stop, you'll eat your lunch that you've got packed with you. A helicopter might come pick you up, bring you to another area, but there's one helicopter that is kind of coordinating and moving different groups, and then the guides are all kind of communicating as a whole to make sure that we're not all running into each other, because the idea is that we've got a group of around 10 people, and we're getting to have kind of our own space and our own time in the parks themselves. So trying to create kind of some of that more quiet, mindful moments where we get to feel, how amazing it is to be in this environment that is not that common for people to be in. And yeah, if you're wanting to go even more strenuous, there is also the option of doing this climb. This one is not one that it's called a via ferrata, and so they've got these things where you can kind of see it in these pictures. There's some hooks and stuff, and you'll be attached in with a harness and climb up here. This is a morning adventure for the ones that are up for much more of an adventure. So this is also an option that they organize for those that are kind of interested in that aspect. So again, there's lots and lots to do at the lodge. You can stay and hang out at the lodge. You can do really simple hikes. You can do more strenuous hikes. And they do typically offer the Via Ferrata one time throughout our visit there. So no matter what you choose, it's spectacular views. It's absolutely stunning. It's really, really beautiful area. And I'm just super excited to bring folks back. This is one of the views at the Bugaboo Lodge. So the spires in the background, can also get up there and do a sunrise there in the morning as well. And it's just right outside the backyard of the lodge itself. So it is just all in all, beautiful area. And that's kind of a good summary of the trip. At the end, when we were leaving the lodge, we do head back into the helicopter and then get transferred right from the lodge itself for a few-hour drive that goes back to Calgary. And that's the end of the trip. It's beautiful, it's amazing, and I hope you are all excited for it. And so, of course, you've got questions on what it is that what's going to happen there in terms of weather. So temperature-wise, it can get quite warm throughout the day. Having good sun protection, having long sleeves, having sunscreen is important, but also bringing rain gear and having warmer gear too, because mountain weather can be very unpredictable and it can change. And so we typically always recommend to have rain gear with you, but also having warm gear, but also having gear that is more appropriate if it is quite hot out. So I've had really hot sunny days. I've also had days where it's cooler and windy and rainy. So we do recommend that you bring a whole variety of things with you. Bring a good pair of hiking shoes, and good meaning ones with good ankle support. When we get up to the lodge, the CMH lodge, they will also check your boots there. to make sure that they're suitable, because they want to make sure that people aren't risking rolling their ankles. And if you just come up with a pair of running shoes or low ankle support, they will recommend borrowing some of their boots there. So especially if you've got feet that are quite particular, then I would recommend making sure that you've invested in a good pair of sturdy hiking boots. Trekking poles, they do have at the lodge, and we do try to have them available in the national parks as well. But if it is something that you want with you quite regularly, I recommend bringing some. And then, yeah, having all different layers, having t-shirts, having long sleeves, having your winter hats, having long pants, shorts, coats. It might seem excessive, but you got to kind of prepare for all different types of weather there. A pair of casual shoes isn't a bad idea too. People will use them oftentimes, you know, going down for breakfast in the morning or going down for some of our meals too. So it's kind of recommended to bring some of them as well. And I think this is the last slide here is just camera wise, what you want to bring. So I do have a DSLR and I do have a telephoto lens. I'll bring a 100 to 400 lens with me for wildlife shooting opportunities, and then kind of more of a wide angle lens for things like the Moraine Lake sunset or sunrise, sorry. And then if you're wanting to do a sunrise at the Bugaboo Lodge and doing some more landscape things. Of course, cell phones, honestly, at this point, they do amazing landscape. There's so many photo potentials with that. So we do a lot with that. And tripod wise, I don't bring one around with me. If you've got one that's compact, lightweight, and you are quite familiar with, you can bring it. But if you don't have one that you're really comfortable using, then it'll probably just kind of take up more space than is necessary. We won't use them very much, but I know people have found them helpful at like Moraine Lake sunrise. You could do a time lapse and that sort of thing. So yeah, and then binoculars. I do recommend bringing binoculars so that we can have a look out for different wildlife. Those mountain goats up in the mountain ranges, it's just helpful to have them. So good idea to have them on the packing list. Yay, I was right. Okay, good. That was the last slide. Yeah, it's an awesome trip. Make sure you're well prepared, and it's so much fun. So I hope that people are pumped to come and see what we've got to offer here. Okay, thanks guys.
Lianne, thank you so much. That just looks like an incredible trip. There's lots of folks who are very excited about joining you and have lots of questions. I know we only have a couple minutes, so can we do a real like rapid fire round?
I'll do my best. We'll go.
All right. Will there be vegetarian food available at every meal?
Yes. Yeah, I often eat vegetarian, so we cater to all dietaries. The more information we can know about it, the better. But yes, vegetarian, vegan, gluten-free, all those options exist.
Awesome. Can you talk a little bit more about how steep the 10-minute walk up to Moraine Lake is? Are most people able to do that?
Yeah, most people are able to do it. I kind of related. It's been a bit kind of manufactured a bit. It's almost like climbing up a set of stairs, rocky stairs, but they've done a good job of making it so that it's a pretty accessible trail. It's not like a climb up. It is just like walking up a set of stairs, essentially, a long set of stairs. But yeah, I've not had a single guest not be able to do it. So yeah.
Excellent. This might not be a rapid fire question, but we'll do our best. Why do the lakes appear turquoise and emerald green?
So that has to do with the sediment that's coming off of the glaciers. So as glaciers are melting, the sediment's kind of coming in and it creates this kind of glacial flower, they call it. It's really fine particles. And because it's so small, these particles are so fine, they remain suspended in the water. And so we see that color because of the way that the light is reflecting off of the glacial flower into our eyes. That's as rapidly as I can answer it. But yeah, essentially it's glacial sediment that's kind of in it.
That was excellent. Let's see, do you experience the aurora during the period when this trip is offered?
No, we're a bit far south. I mean, the possibility exists, but I have personally been living in the mountains for 5 years, and I think it has happened on 2, maybe 3 days in that time frame, because you need a very strong auroral storm in order for the aurora to be seen this far south. So I have never seen it on a trip. I have personally never seen it while I've lived in the mountains for 5 years. I know that there was sightings of it a couple of weeks ago, but no, I do not anticipate seeing the aurora on the trips. I would love to. That would be incredible, but no, I do not anticipate.
Okay. A bunch of questions about the physicality, which relates to the elevation of the heli-hike. Can you talk a little bit about elevation and then how folks are able to sort of tailor the activity level to their needs and wishes? So if are you locked into one level of activity, or can you have more strenuous days, less strenuous days?
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's great that it caters so much to you. So when we're in the national parks itself, the national park hikes, none of them are overly strenuous, with the exception of doing the Fairview Outlook or Overlook if you want to do that. But we do cater to ones that are kind of wanting to do an easier stroll, and then offer a couple of opportunities where it's a bit more strenuous. And then when we're at the lodge itself, no, you are not restricted to a specific group. So if we show up on day one and that first afternoon hike, you're like, you know what, I'm really tired today, I want to take it super easy. And then you see what the easy has to offer. And then you're thinking, yeah, tomorrow I'm ready, I'm gung-ho. Talk to your expedition leader, or even talking to the guides there. They're constantly modifying because they want to make sure that people are happy with the experience that they're getting. So you can swap between different groups. Of course, if you're like, I want to go running through the mountains, and they can physically kind of assess that you're not probably not suited for that type of style. They also want to make sure that you're having fun, and so there's flow, there's fluidity to the groups that are made. If you're happy, you can stay in your one. If you want to swap it up, you can change it up a bit too. And so there's lots of change that can happen there. And elevation wise, I mean, it is going to be quite a bit higher, especially if you're a person that's at sea level. But that's why we do things by like making sure that we are drinking plenty of water, consuming food to keep us with good energy, sunscreen. I know that's not necessary to do with the elevation, but it's certainly important to do here as well. And then we also take breaks. It's not just going to be like, let's go for a long, hard trek through the mountains. We will stop, we take breaks, because it's important to also just stop and take in the beauty of the area too. So yeah, it does cater to most audiences. Of course, you do need to have a certain level of physicality. I think the trip is rated as moderate. So it is wanting to be able to go over some rockier terrain, going up and down hills, and being able to do all of that quite comfortably is important, but it's not like let's go for a super hardcore, strenuous 17-mile hike kind of thing. So yeah.
Excellent. I've got one more question for you. There's another cluster that revolves around grizzlies. Do you expect to see grizzlies? Do you wear bear bells or take bear spray? Can you just address that topic?
We will use, or we've got bear spray in some areas that we will bring out. Grizzlies, yeah, I mean, I do see them. I go hike around here and I'll see grizzlies. I think we saw grizzlies on every trip last year, and some of the sightings are going to be farther away. Some of them might be closer up. The gondola, I think we did go 100% last year. Of course, you never really know with wildlife, but even when we're doing the drives along the Icefields Parkway, or even in some of the other national parks, I've seen them just on the side of the road. So yeah, our chances of seeing grizzlies is pretty good. We do try to gear it up so that we can. Of course, it's never 100%. And then when we're hiking, because we are in areas in the national parks, and most of the areas that we're going to be in, there's quite a few people there. Not as many bears are going to be there. And then the guides up in the lodges, they do have the bear safety and bear protection there. So it's commonly bear spray. And because we're a larger group and we're making noise, essentially that kind of helps to keep our safety in check when we're looking, or when we're out in kind of bear territory. So we keep our wits about us, but I'm not like worried about safety. And we talk about bear safety and wildlife safety in general when we do our welcome dinner and at each of the hikes and stuff too. But chances are good, and safety is very important to us. Hopefully that answers it.
Perfect. Lianne, thank you again for really helping us feel prepared and excited about this trip. I'll turn it back to you for any closing comments.
Yeah, thanks everyone for coming. I hope that if you've already booked the trip, you're super pumped. Pictures and stuff, seeing the area and videos. I don't know. I can't really say anything more about it. It's my backyard. I absolutely love it. I am so excited to share it with people. If you haven't already booked, maybe this has inspired you to come and do it. We've got several amazing expedition leaders that are going to be guiding these trips, as well as our Discover Banff tour partnership and the CMH Lodge staff. All of them are incredible, and it's a super fun trip. And who doesn't want to get out in the mountains and look for animals? It's what I would do with all of my time if I could. So yeah, thanks for joining, and I hope to see some of you guys out there.
I also want to thank everybody for tuning in. Please join us again tomorrow for our next daily dose of nature. You can check out this week's lineup, including registration links, on our website at nathab.com/webinars. We did record today's presentation, and we will have the replay available on our website soon. With that, we'll conclude the webinar. Have a wonderful day, everyone.